People think being old means you stop feeling pain the way younger people do. That your heart grows calloused with time. They are wrong. I was standing in my kitchen on a cold December morning, holding a wooden spoon that had belonged to my mother, watching steam rise from a pot of chicken soup I'd been making since dawn. The smell was gentle and familiar. Onions, thyme, bay leaf. The smell of every Christmas I had ever known. And yet, that was the morning I learned I was no longer welcome at my own family's table. My name is Eleanor Whitman. I am 72 years old. I raised 2 children mostly alone after their father passed, worked 3 jobs at different points in my life, and cooked every single Christmas dinner for over 40 years. I had scars on my hands from hot pans, burn marks from ovens that didn't work right, and arthritis that flared whenever winter came. But that year, none of that mattered. The message came in a group chat. Not a phone call. Not a visit. A message. Mom, this year we're doing Christmas dinner at our place. Please don't bring food. Karen's mother will be cooking. I stared at my phone for a long moment, rereading it again and again, as if the words might soften if I looked long enough. Please don't bring food. That sentence hit harder than any insult could have. I typed back slowly, my fingers trembling. I already started cooking. I can bring something small. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then Karen replied. Honestly, Eleanor, your food just isn't very good anymore. We want this to be nice. Nice. As if my cooking, my love, had somehow expired with age. I stood there in my quiet kitchen while the kettle screamed behind me, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound. The walls felt closer than they ever had. The house, once filled with laughter and noise, seemed to hold its breath. I turned off the stove. Slowly. Carefully. As if any sudden movement might shatter me. Karen had been in my life for 12 years. From the moment my son married her, she treated me like a guest who overstayed her welcome. Correcting the way I spoke. Reorganizing my cabinets when she visited. Wrinkling her nose at my curtains, my furniture, my clothes. But this was different. This wasn't criticism. This was erasure. When my son, Michael, finally called me later that afternoon, his voice was rushed, distracted. Mom, you saw the message, right? Yes, I said. My voice surprised me. Calm, steady, almost distant. It's just. Karen's mom is really particular about food. You know how it is. I did know how it was. I knew exactly how it was. Am I still invited? I asked. There was a pause. Too long. Well, maybe it's better if you don't come this year. Less stress for everyone. Less stress. I thanked him. Because that's what mothers like me do. We thank people for breaking us. That night, I sat alone at my dining table, surrounded by dishes I had already prepared. Stuffing wrapped carefully in foil. Cranberry sauce cooling in glass bowls. A pie crust resting under a towel, waiting for a filling that would never be made. I ate cold soup straight from the pot. I cried quietly so the neighbors wouldn't hear. On Christmas Eve, snow fell softly outside my window. The kind of snow that makes everything look clean, untouched, forgiving. I wrapped the gifts I had already bought for my grandchildren, sweaters, books, little wooden toys, and placed them by the door, unsure whether they would ever be opened. No one came. No knock. No call. No apology. On Christmas morning, my phone buzzed again. A photo. Karen and her mother standing proudly in a bright, modern kitchen. A long table set with fine china. My grandchildren smiling in their matching outfits. And in the caption, perfect Christmas dinner. Some traditions are better left behind. I felt something inside me finally crack. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet, final break. I realized then that I had spent my life shrinking so others could feel comfortable. Swallowing pain. Letting disrespect slide. Telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But that morning, Sitting alone with the sound of church bells echoing faintly in the distance, I made a decision. If I no longer had a seat at their table, then I would build a life where I no longer needed one. And they would learn, slowly, painfully, what it meant to underestimate a woman who had nothing left to lose. They thought banning me from Christmas dinner was the end of my story. They had no idea it was only the beginning. There is a kind of silence that destroys you, and there is another kind that sharpens you. For the first few weeks after that Christmas, I lived inside both. I stopped calling, stopped checking the family group chat, stopped reaching for my phone every time it buzzed, hoping, foolishly, that it might be my son apologizing. Instead, the messages came from others. A neighbor asking why my driveway had been empty on Christmas morning. A church friend gently asking if I'd been sick. An old coworker saying she'd seen photos online and wondered why I wasn't there. I smiled when I replied. I had other plans, I said. Which, in a way, was finally true. Because something had shifted inside me, quietly, firmly, like a door closing that would never open the same way again. I began waking early, before the sun rose. I made coffee the way I liked it, strong, bitter, honest. I sat at my kitchen table and stared out the window, watching the neighborhood come alive. Cars starting. Lights flickering on. Life moving forward. For the first time in decades, no one needed anything from me. And that terrified me. You don't realize how much of your identity is wrapped around being useful until you're suddenly not allowed to be. I had spent years being the emergency call, the babysitter, the holiday planner, the emotional cushion. Now I was excess. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the old cedar chest in my bedroom. Inside were folders I hadn't touched since my husband died. Legal documents, property papers, bank statements, letters written in a careful, younger hand, mine. I didn't know what I was looking for at first. Only that I needed to remember who I had been before I was reduced to just the mother. And then I found it. A deed. Yellowed at the edges. Folded neatly. My name typed clearly at the top. The house. Their house. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding. I remembered that day clearly now, signing papers while Michael was still newly married, trusting, eager. Karen had barely glanced at me then, too busy scrolling on her phone. You don't mind if we put it in your name temporarily, Mom? Michael had said. Just until our credit settles. I hadn't minded. Of course I hadn't. I was his mother. What I had forgotten was that it had never been changed. I didn't feel joy when I realized it. I felt clarity. For years, I had been careful not to notice certain things. Karen's sharp comments. The way my opinions were dismissed. The subtle shift from "we need you" to "we tolerate you." But clarity is a dangerous thing when it finally arrives. I called a lawyer the next morning. A woman named Rachel Levin, calm-voiced, efficient, kind in a way that didn't pity me. Mrs. Whitman, she said after reviewing the documents, you are the sole legal owner of that property. I closed my eyes. So, I can do whatever I want with it. Yes, she said gently, and no one can stop you. I hung up and sat there for a long time. I didn't want revenge. Not the loud kind. Not the dramatic kind. What I wanted was balance. Weeks passed. I said nothing. Did nothing that anyone could see. But behind the scenes, I moved carefully. I updated my will. I separated finances that had long been tangled in family convenience. I changed passwords. I cancelled automatic payments I hadn't realized I was still covering. Each click of the mouse felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Karen noticed first. She called one afternoon, her voice sharp with irritation. Eleanor, Our streaming service got cancelled. Oh, I said pleasantly. That must be frustrating. Well, can you fix it? I don't think so, I replied. It's not in my name anymore. There was a pause. Then a laugh, thin, forced. Right. Anyway, are you coming by this weekend? Mom's visiting. No, I said simply. Another pause. Longer this time. Oh, she said. Okay. She didn't ask why. Michael called later that night. You okay, Mom? Karen says you've been distant. I smiled to myself. I'm just busy, I said. Living. That word felt strange on my tongue. New, powerful. I joined a local gardening club. I started walking every evening. I repainted my living room the soft green color my husband had always loved. I cooked for myself, meals that didn't need approval. And slowly, quietly, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wasn't until Easter approached that things began to unravel. Karen sent another message. We're hosting again. You can come if you want. Just don't bring food. I stared at the screen. The old me would have accepted. Grateful for scraps. Careful not to offend. But that woman no longer lived here. I typed back. Thank you for the invitation. I won't be attending. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then Michael called. Mom, what's going on? He asked, frustration leaking into his voice. Karen feels like you're punishing us. I laughed softly. No, Michael, I said. I'm just choosing myself. He didn't understand. Not yet. And as I hung up the phone, looking at the deed folded neatly back into its folder, I knew something else too. They still thought they held the power. They had no idea the ground beneath them had already shifted. They believed I was fading quietly into the background. They didn't know I was standing on the foundation they thought belonged to them. There is a moment, quiet, unannounced, when people who have taken you for granted begin to feel uneasy. They don't know why at first. They just sense that something they assumed was permanent isn't. That moment came for my son and daughter-in-law in late spring. It started with a letter. Not a dramatic one. Not threatening. Just official. White envelope. Return address from a local law office. Karen opened it, of course. She always did. She liked control. She liked being the first to know. I found out later how her hands had trembled when she read the first line. Notice of property review and title confirmation. She called Michael into the kitchen, her voice tight. What is this? She demanded. Michael skimmed the page, confused at first, then pale. It says Mom is the legal owner. The silence that followed must have been thick enough to choke on. Because for years, that house had been their proof. Proof they were successful. Proof they'd made it. Proof they didn't need me anymore. And suddenly, the walls were whispering a different story. Michael called me that night. Not with anger. Not with warmth. With fear. Mom, he said carefully, we got some paperwork today. I imagined you might, I replied calmly. What does it mean? He asked. Is something wrong? I leaned back in my chair, the evening light washing softly across the room I had rebuilt piece by piece. No, I said. Nothing's wrong. Everything's finally correct. Karen grabbed the phone from him. You did this on purpose, she snapped. You're trying to scare us. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. No, Karen, I said. I'm just no longer pretending. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. You can't take our house, she said. We have a child. You banned me from Christmas dinner, I replied gently. You told me I didn't belong in your home. Remember. Silence. Michael spoke again, his voice breaking. Mom, why didn't you say anything before? I closed my eyes. Because you never asked. After that call, things moved quickly. Too quickly for them. The bank requested updated ownership confirmation. Their refinancing stalled. Their sense of certainty cracked. Karen started sending messages. Polite at first. Hope you're well. We miss you. Maybe we can talk. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. Out of self-respect. Then came the visit. One Saturday afternoon, I heard a car pull into my driveway. I knew who it was before the doorbell rang. I felt it in my bones, that old tension trying to crawl back into my chest. I opened the door anyway. Karen stood there, perfectly styled, eyes glossy. Michael hovered behind her like a shadow. "Hi," she said softly. Too softly. "We thought we'd check on you." I stepped aside and let them in. They looked around as if seeing my home for the first time. The fresh paint. The new furniture. The absence of guilt. "You've changed things," Michael said. "Yes," I replied. "I finally decorated for myself." Karen sat down, clasping her hands. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "Christmas just got complicated." I looked at her for a long moment. "No," I said. "It didn't. You made it simple. You showed me exactly where I stood." Her eyes filled with tears. "We were stressed," she whispered. "My mom had opinions. And you're sensitive." I laughed softly. "Yes," I said. "I am. That's what happens when you care deeply. But sensitivity isn't weakness." Michael leaned forward. "Mom," he said, voice trembling. "Are you really going to do this? Take the house." I stood up. "I'm not taking anything," I said. "I already own it." Karen's tears fell then, real this time. "We'll do better," she promised. "We'll invite you. We'll listen." I believed her. And still, it wasn't enough. Because love offered only when power shifts is not love. It's negotiation. "I don't want apologies," I said quietly. "I want honesty." They looked at me, waiting. "I want you to understand," I continued, "that for years, I made myself small so you could feel big. I paid. I helped. I stayed quiet. And when I finally asked for dignity, you told me I didn't belong." Karen shook her head. "We didn't think." "I know," I interrupted. "That was the problem. I told them my decision. Not eviction. Not punishment. Boundaries. They would continue living there, under a formal lease. Fair rent. Clear terms. Respect required." Karen stiffened. "You're turning us into tenants." "Yes," I said calmly. "Because that's what you already treated me like, an outsider in something I helped build." Michael nodded slowly, shame flooding his face. "We accept," he said. Karen said nothing. As they left, she turned back. "You've changed," she said, almost accusingly. I smiled. "No," I replied. "I've remembered who I was." That night, I sat alone on my porch, listening to the cicadas hum. I felt no triumph. No bitterness. Only relief. For the first time, the balance was right. And somewhere deep inside, I knew. This wasn't the end of the reckoning. It was only the beginning of understanding what it truly costs to push someone aside. They thought the house was the lesson. They didn't realize the real reckoning was still coming, and it would cost far more than rent. Not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. Once boundaries are drawn, people react in only two ways. They grow, or they rebel. My daughter-in-law chose rebellion first. It began subtly. Karen stopped replying to the lease emails. Rent arrived late, always with excuses. Repairs were forgotten. Rules were misunderstood. Michael tried to play mediator, but his voice had lost authority. For the first time in his adult life, he wasn't standing on ground he owned. And Karen hated that. One evening, I received a call from the property manager I had hired quietly. A woman named Denise who didn't tolerate nonsense. "Just so you know," Denise said calmly, "your daughter-in-law told me you're just doing this to punish them." I laughed softly. "No," I replied. "I'm doing this to protect myself." The tension reached its breaking point 2 weeks later, at a family gathering I hadn't planned to attend. Michael called that morning. "Mom," he said, hesitant, "we're having a small dinner tonight. Just family. No drama." I knew better. But something in his voice, tired, humbled, made me say yes. When I arrived, the atmosphere was brittle. Karen's mother sat at the table like a queen, eyes sharp, smile thin. Karen hovered beside her, stiff and defensive. I took my seat quietly. Dinner began politely. Too politely. Then Karen's mother spoke. "So," she said loudly, "I hear you've decided to make things difficult for the kids." The table went silent. Karen didn't stop her. Michael looked down. I folded my napkin. "I've decided to make things honest," I replied. She scoffed. "After all they've done for you?" I raised my eyes. "And what would that be?" I asked. Karen shifted uncomfortably. "They gave you a place in their lives," her mother said. "But instead of gratitude, you chose control." I smiled, not sweetly, but clearly. "No," I said. "I chose dignity. Something your daughter forgot when she banned me from Christmas dinner." Karen gasped. "That's not." "It is," I interrupted gently. "And we both know it." Her mother waved a dismissive hand. "Old people get sensitive," she said. "You should be grateful they tolerate you." Something snapped. Not in anger. In clarity. I stood. "I buried a husband," I said quietly. "I raised a son. I built stability from nothing. And I will not be spoken to as if I am a burden." Michael finally looked up. "She's right," he said. Karen froze. "Michael." "No," he continued, voice shaking. "She's right. We crossed a line. And pretending we didn't won't fix it." Karen stared at him, stunned. "You're taking her side?" "I'm taking responsibility," he said. Her mother scoffed again. "Well then," she said, pushing her chair back, "enjoy losing your marriage over this." She left. Karen followed, furious, humiliated. Michael stayed. He sat there long after the plates were cleared. "I didn't protect you," he said finally. "And I let her make you feel small." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "I don't need protection," I said. "I need respect." Tears filled his eyes. "I want to fix this," he whispered. "You can," I replied. "But not by asking me to forget." That night changed something. Karen moved out 2 weeks later, temporarily, she claimed. But she took her mother's advice and her bitterness with her. Michael stayed in the house alone. Rent paid on time now. Emails respectful. Apologies sincere. One afternoon, he came to see me. "I finally understand," he said. "You didn't do this to hurt us." I nodded. "I did it to survive." He swallowed. Karen filed for separation. I felt sadness, not satisfaction. "I'm sorry," I said honestly. "No," he replied. I think this is what happens when people build relationships on entitlement." That word, entitlement, hung heavy between us. As summer faded into fall, peace returned to my life. I cooked again. I laughed again. I slept without knots in my chest. And something unexpected happened. I stopped needing their approval. Then came the letter. Karen wanted to renegotiate everything. Ownership. Living arrangements. Family harmony. I read it once. Then I folded it and set it aside. Because the truth was simple. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need victory. I already had power. And power, when held quietly, speaks louder than any argument. They thought consequences were temporary. They didn't realize the final chapter wouldn't be about punishment, but about who truly walks away free. Some endings arrive with noise, arguments, apologies, grand speeches. Mine arrived quietly, on an ordinary morning, with sunlight slipping through the kitchen window and a pot of soup warming on the stove, the same soup Karen once mocked without tasting. I had learned something by then. Peace doesn't announce itself. It settles. The weeks after Karen's letter passed without drama. No court filings. No angry calls. Just distance. And for the first time, it felt healthy. Michael came by one afternoon. Thinner. Calmer. I moved out, he said, sitting across from me. I found a small apartment. I nodded. Good, I said. Everyone needs a place where they can hear themselves think. He hesitated. She wants to talk, he added. About everything. I stirred the soup slowly. And what do you want? I asked. He exhaled. I want to be better than I was. That answer mattered more than any apology. We talked for hours that day. About his childhood. About the pressure he felt to choose sides. About how love can twist when it's mixed with fear. At the end, he said something that healed a wound I didn't know was still open. I forgot, he said, voice breaking, that you're a person before you're my mother. I reached for his hand. And I forgive you, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. He nodded. I know. Winter came softly that year. I hosted Christmas at my home, not out of defiance, but because I wanted to. A few friends. A neighbor who had lost her sister. A young couple who couldn't afford to travel. We laughed. We ate well. We felt seen. Michael stopped by briefly. He brought flowers. He hugged me longer than usual. Karen didn't come. And that was okay. In January, the paperwork finalized. The lease remained. The boundaries stayed firm. Karen moved in with her mother. Michael continued therapy. Life didn't turn perfect. But it turned honest. One evening, I sat alone with a cup of tea, thinking about everything that had happened. The dinner ban, the humiliation, the shock of reclaiming my own power. I realized something important. I had stopped shrinking. For years, I believed being a good mother meant being quiet, accommodating, invisible. I was wrong. Being a good mother, a good woman, means modeling self-respect. It means teaching, even late in life, that love does not require self-erasure. Karen eventually sent a short message. I didn't understand you. I see now that I crossed lines. I'm sorry. I replied with one sentence. I hope you find peace. No bitterness. No reopening wounds. Just closure. Today, my life is simple. I cook because I enjoy it. I host when I want to. I help when I'm asked, not demanded. And when people speak to me now, they listen when I speak back. Because I learned something I wish I'd known sooner. You don't need to raise your voice to be powerful. You don't need revenge to win. You don't need approval to belong. Sometimes, the strongest move is choosing yourself. Calmly, clearly, and without apology. If you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel like a burden in your own family, if you've ever been silenced to keep the peace, if you've ever swallowed hurt just to be the bigger person, remember this. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to be respected, at any age. If this story touched you, comment below and tell us where you're watching from. If it reminded you of your own journey, like this video so others can find it. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, subscribe for more real emotional stories about strength, dignity, and quiet power. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop explaining your worth. Candle, Yellow Heart.